Dangers and despair. Life in the boiler room was a constant dance with death and injury. The relentless heat often led to heat stroke and a debilitating condition known as stoker's cramp. Burns were common, from accidental contact with superheated pipes, the open mouths of furnaces, or even overflowing fires. Experienced stokers sometimes wore wooden clogs, a small defense against the molten coal and ash that could char a foot instantly. Beyond the heat, the machinery itself posed threats, with moving parts and heavy tools causing horrific accidents. The suffocating coal dust took a severe toll on their lungs over time, a slow poison inhaled with every shift. The noise, an unceasing industrial roar, surely contributed to long-term hearing loss. And for some, the sheer brutality of the environment pushed them to the brink of sanity. There are accounts of the intense heat causing temporary mental breaks, leading desperate men to seek escape by any means, even jumping overboard. In times of battle, the boiler room became an even more terrifying place. Watertight doors would be sealed, cutting off any direct escape. The men below had little knowledge of the action above, only feeling the jarring impacts of enemy fire, the ship violently maneuvering, and the recoil of their own great guns. If a torpedo or shell struck the ship below the waterline, the stokers were among the most vulnerable, facing instant death from scalding steam or being trapped in a rapidly flooding, fiery grave. Their chances of survival in such a catastrophe were almost non-existent, often perishing quickly with their ship. Their sacrifice, however, was critical. The ability of the warship to move and fight depended entirely on the continued heroic efforts of these men, pushing the engines to their limits, even as their own lives hung by a thread. The unsung engine. Despite their crucial role, the stokers and engineers were long denied the respect given to the line officers and seamen. Engineers, responsible for the entire complex machinery, struggled for professional recognition and equal status within the traditionally sail-dominated naval hierarchy. The bluejackets or sailors were celebrated, while the men in the engine room were often forgotten, their stories obscured by prejudice and myth. Yet, it was these men, toiling in the extreme conditions of the boiler room, who ushered in a new era of naval power. Steam propulsion freed warships from the fickle winds, granting them unprecedented speed and maneuverability, allowing direct routes and strategic independence. This transformation of naval warfare, from sail to steam, was built on the backs of the stokers, the true unsung heroes of the 19th century Navy. Their relentless physical labor and constant peril formed the invisible engine that drove the world's most powerful fleets. Life in a 19th century naval boiler room was a testament to human endurance against unimaginable odds. It was a world of darkness, dust, and deafening noise, where survival was a daily struggle and glory was a distant dream. The sacrifices made by these men, in their confined, fiery hell, powered not just warships, but the very evolution of naval history. If this journey into the brutal heart of a 19th century warship fascinated you, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from history's forgotten corners. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the past. The Iron Beast groaned below decks, a hungry giant demanding constant feed. Deep within the hull of a 19th century warship, a different kind of battle raged unseen by those above. Here, men toiled in a hell forged of heat, steel, and endless coal. Their fight was not for glory, but for survival, powering the ship through sheer brute force. This was the boiler room, a hidden world where light came only from roaring furnaces. For the men condemned to this fiery pit, there was no glory, and often no escape. The infernal machine imagined stepping into that confined space, far below the waterline, where the very air fought against you. The temperature inside a naval boiler room often soared to an unbearable 120 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even hotter near the furnace mouths. This was an environment of constant, overwhelming heat, a suffocating blanket that pressed in from every direction. Your ears would be assaulted by a deafening symphony of clanging shovels, the roar of the flames devouring coal, and the shuddering of the great engines themselves. Every wall, every pipe, radiated heat, turning the entire compartment into a giant iron oven. Natural light was a forgotten luxury here. The only illumination came from the hellish glow of the open furnace doors, casting dancing shadows on sweat-slicked faces. Ventilation was minimal at best, a desperate attempt to move some of the stifling air, but never enough to offer true relief. The atmosphere was thick with coal dust, a fine, gritty powder that coated everything, clinging to skin and hair, and inevitably filling the lungs with every strained breath. This dust was more than just an irritant. It was a constant companion, slowly working its way into every pore and passage, a tangible mark of this brutal existence. The Black Gang. The men who endured this inferno were known colloquially as the Black Gang. They were stokers and coal passers, the vital yet often invisible heart of the steam-powered Navy. In the rigid hierarchy of 19th century naval life, these men occupied the very lowest rung, commonly believed to come from the poorest and least educated parts of society. They were seen as social outcasts, sometimes stereotyped as troublemakers, their essential work rarely earning them respect or recognition from the sailors on the decks above. Becoming a stoker often meant learning on the job, thrown into the deep end of a scorching, noisy world with little formal training. Yet, their work was anything but simple. Maintaining the fires required skill and constant attention. Each stoker was typically responsible for feeding several furnaces, ensuring the fire bed remained even and burning efficiently to generate the enormous amounts of steam needed. This wasn't just shoveling. It was a precise art, judging the coal, spreading it just right, and making sure the pressure never dropped. Without these men and their tireless efforts, the grand warships, symbols of national power, would be nothing more than drifting hulks. The endless feed, the demands of steam propulsion meant an insatiable appetite for coal. A single warship could consume hundreds of tons of coal per day to maintain speed, especially with the increasingly powerful compound and triple expansion engines of the era. This constant consumption meant that the Black Gang worked in shifts, usually 4 to 6 hours long, a relentless cycle of shoveling, trimming, and battling the heat. To cope with the extreme temperatures, men would often strip to the waist, their bodies glistening with sweat, exposed to the searing, radiant heat from the furnaces. But the work of the stokers was only part of the story. Before any coal could be shoveled into the furnaces, it had to be brought from the bunkers, deep within the ship. This task fell to the coal passers, or trimmers, who worked in even more cramped and often unventilated spaces. They would move the coal, sometimes using wheelbarrows, to the fire room, ensuring a steady supply for the stokers. Coaling the ship itself was a monumental undertaking, an all-hands event that could take hours or even days to complete. The entire crew, from midshipmen to the lowest ratings, would participate, hauling heavy sacks of coal from colliers or lighters, winching them across, and dumping them down hatches into the bunkers. It was an exhausting, filthy process, leaving ships and men coated in black dust long after the last ton was stowed.